Hello, everybody.
And hello, yes.
All right, so there we go with that. Okay. So, welcome to the Mikestand, everybody. Of course, as always, guys, if you can like and share the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people on, that'd be appreciated. If you can like and share, get the word out. Also, if anything we talk about tonight grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. We'll try to answer questions to the best of our ability. So we're gonna wait, give people a chance to come in a few minutes. So we're just gonna hang out a bit. Yeah. So how's your day been, Rick? How's your week been?
Uh, they've been fine. You know, pretty much same old, same old. Well, I got a pair of work boots earlier this week. I'm going to be going to a temporary agency tomorrow, hopefully getting some work. Hey,
Hi, how are things going?
All right.
not too bad. And yourself?
Pretty good.
Yeah, we're gonna hang out for a moment, give people a chance to come in before we get started. Um, so
Has
so
the
Rick,
X-Men?
do you want to continue with what you were saying, Rick? Because I
Uh, well, Alco is, I think, just asking me something or whatever.
oh
I'm not sure.
Oh, I was
Ricky?
just wondering if anyone saw is the X-Men season finale out yet for this week, or I know it's coming out
X-Men
soon.
'97. No, I haven't even been watching that.
Uh,
Albeit, from
well,
according to Yellow Flash, that series has not been as bad as everybody thought it would be. So,
yeah.
um,
Is there supposed to be 9 or 10 episodes?
I think with a lot of these Netflix series, they're like 10 episodes. With a lot of
Do you
these,
know, Elk?
I don't know. I think if there's one more, I think I've watched episode 8. So I think if there was one more, which I've heard, that would be the ninth. But I
Okay.
didn't
The
check
ninth
the high
is
seas for it.
the ninth is out. I saw it. I've watched the ninth. I wasn't sure whether it was last or not. And this is pathetic. They couldn't even keep the number of episodes that there was in the original, which was 12 or 13. I
hmm
forget. For the
Oh,
original cartoon.
I've enjoyed the series. I thought it was quite good. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
it
was
is.
pretty good. The worst thing came in this latest episode. The most it wasn't cringy. It's just when Rogue went to refer to Morph and she said they or them. I forget which. And it's like it took me back for a second. It's like
I don't
one
think I'd
sec.
seen that episode. I didn't catch that. Yeah.
Well, according to
That was in the ninth.
according to IMDb, there's 11 episodes to X-Men '97. So there's 11.
Okay.
So it might be getting close to the number of the first. I think the first season was like 13 episodes, not 12. I think it was 13.
Yeah, 12 or 13 in the original. Well, they all were 12 or 13. I couldn't remember exactly,
Mhm.
but I found that funny because they were just one longer than a comic. I think they were all one longer than a comic book year. It's like really.
Well, because I think because the seasons were kind of divided by story arcs. So you had the first season, which was kind of like the whole Sentinel arc, and then you had the second season was of the original series was like the Phoenix Saga, and then you had the Dark Phoenix Saga. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah. It's interesting how it's panned out because they put storylines in that they would not have been able to put in '97 because those comics wouldn't have existed yet. Like with Bastion. Well, you've watched enough of it. The Bastion and the
Yeah,
humans.
I'm not sure. I watch it while I'm doing other things, I admit, while I'm working, to be honest. So sometimes I don't pick up on the subtleties or even the most obvious things if I'm busy at work. So I know Bastion is a time traveler, but what are the subjects that he's brought up that
Well,
wouldn't be
it's
brought
not.
up in the 90s?
Well, it's not about being brought up like Bastion in the comics. I think it wasn't until into the thousands that uh, he created it so the humans could turn into sentinels, if you will, prime sentinels. So that
Oh,
storyline
okay.
wasn't in the the any story arc before '97, and they were doing story arcs that were available in the comics. So I'm just saying that wouldn't have been done in '97 technically. They should have, to me, they should have picked up a storyline that was before '97 in the
That's a
comic.
little bit of being a stickler. I thought you meant it was like a topic or a social change that had
No,
happened
no,
since
no,
the 90s.
no, no, no. No, not that. I know I'm being a bit of a stickler, but it's just it's. I guess it's sort of funny or ironic that they're taking a storyline that happened after the show ended and putting it in the show,
Hmm.
the original show.
Yeah. I've appreciated it. I've looked and
Yeah,
looked, and I do think they toned down Rogue's ass. I have been carefully contemplating both versions. The
yeah,
95 version of Rogue's ass and her current version, and I do think that yes, they have toned down the
yeah,
the butt cam that they did occasionally on Rogue, where they shot her butt in the lower left hand side, and the main action
yeah,
sort of just past the focal point of her, or
yeah,
had the focal point of the
yeah.
shot of the
Yeah,
imaginary shot just past her
they
butt.
don't
They
give
don't.
Rogue they don't give Rogue all her assets.
Yes, exactly. And I was disappointed in that because again,
Well,
it's
well, I think also because of course with with the modern day production crew, of course they want the whole idea of Rogue being a femme fatale is something over their head a bit. It's like they don't want her to be, even though that sex appeal is actually part of what makes her character interesting, because it's like it's one of those things. Well, you can look but you can't touch, and but if you touch, you're basically dead. It's like
well,
you
it's
know.
definitely it's also a primary misunderstanding of human nature. A sexual attraction is one of the primary drivers of why humans do what they do, especially younger humans. Like, why do men do much of what they do all day, every day? Well, sure, part of it's money, but even with those trying to acquire money, most of it, at least indirectly when you're young, is towards acquiring sex and
Well,
sex
of course,
appeal.
because when you're young, when you're young, you're still in that phase of life where you're considered quote unquote in your prime, to where you're it's that natural drive, right? That
Yeah,
natural drive to procreate. You
yeah,
know,
definitely. Or
you
just
know.
to have sex. Sex doesn't have to be about procreation. It's about pair bonding and developing intimate relationships with other human beings, not just.
Well, that's from a human aspect, but at its core, okay, at its core, amongst all animals, there is that instinctual drive to procreate.
Yeah, but
Okay.
humans are a little different. We're a little bit more conscious. We do
Yeah,
sex. We do sex just for recreation too.
and it's for intimacy. It's to also develop intimate relationships with other human beings on the planet. I think that's the primary driver of sex. Is I don't think everybody goes out, hey, I want to get laid tonight because I want to have a kid. I think most people
Well,
have
that's
sex
more the
because they want
human
to
aspect. That's more
develop a
the human aspect.
relationship.
But I think even if you go back to like Kate, cavemen and Neanderthals and stuff like that, the drive to procreate was the main driver. Okay, you could argue, you could make the argument that as humans developed intelligence and developed the ability to communicate and things like that, that yeah, there's a need for the pleasure side of sex, and sex in of itself, was a main driver. But at its core, what it was created for was to procreate.
Yeah, that's what I'll agree. That's what it was created for.
RJ's here.
It didn't take long.
Hey, RJ.
What conversation did I stumble into? We're talking about procreation? Oh no.
Well,
we're talking about Rogues Behind, and it went downhill from there, or uphill, whichever you decide.
Yeah, we were talking as we're waiting for more of you to come. We were just kind of killing some time here before, at least
I guarantee you can work with Rogues Behind all you want. You're not going to procreate. That's you're going from the wrong end. It doesn't work that way.
Still fun to try, but yes.
Still fun to try. Practice. It's the practice run.
Exactly.
No, we went from talking about the changes they made to Rogue's body in X-Men 97 to the nature of sex and having a bit of a debate on the nature of sex. Okay, that's where it went. But anyways, well, now that we do have everybody here, or if Metal comes in, that would be cool too. But thank you for joining us, RJ, because now that you're here, now we'll get into before we get started on the main topic.
Oh, sure. Stop all the sex talk now that I'm here. Great.
Well, again, I wanted you here because there's an article I wanted to go over with some of you guys. It was something that Elk, myself, and Tim started a couple weeks ago when we were covering the whole Disney and Congress. I've explained that to you. And I wanted to have you guys here to hear, some of Elk's points of view on it. I was hoping we get Tim, but of course Tim's not available. But I can kind of fill you in on what Tim had said and stuff like that from that point. But anyways, before we do get into the main attraction, as it were, what we're gonna do right now is I'm gonna give you guys each a chance to, do an intro. Tell everybody a little bit about yourselves. Promoting projects you're doing. Anything like that. Also, of course, just a reminder to those in the chat. And of course, the guests here too. If you haven't already, you guys can help us out by liking and sharing the stream, so we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here we talk about grabs your attention, feel free to comment and/or ask questions. We'll try to answer the questions to the best of our ability. So, with all that being said, we're going to go counterclockwise. We're going to start with RJ, go to Elk, Rick, and then we'll get going here. So, RJ, you're up.
I'm RJ Carter. I'm Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com, myopic proofreader for Critical Blast Publishing, and Chief Envelope Licker for Critical Blast Logistics. It's all under one umbrella.
All right, and I also will be having you this Friday as my co-host. We go over comics that went on sale from Novelty Press from February 1940 as well. So,
that's correct.
Yeah. So, all right. Was there anything else you wanted to add to all that before we? Okay, Elk.
Too tired.
I have no projects that are public-facing ongoing. I am just a lifelong lover of genre fiction, from Sherlock Holmes and the Maltese Falcon to Superman to Batman to Richie Rich to Casper the Friendly Ghost and many nerdier things before and since. And I just appreciate having a chance to chat about genre fiction and sci-fi and nerddom.
All right, Rick.
Well, as Mike just said, I'm Rick. I'm from Cross Comics. And I have a channel here on YouTube. If you want to go check it out.
I know I forgot to mention that too. if you have links to share, feel free to share the links. Sorry about that, Rick. Didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no problem. I'm pretty much done. And a question for RJ: have you lost some weight?
I've lost about 60 pounds.
Cool.
So
I
here's
can tell.
the link to Rick's channel, and for those in the chat who may want to go check that out. RJ, as I said, if you feel up to it, you can also share any links you want to share as well, as always. So with that, now that we got the intros out of the way, let's get to why we're all here, which is this article.
A question the philosophers have been debating for eons.
Well, the thing is, here's the thing. When Tim and I were covering this article a couple weeks ago, right? Elk had made a statement that sparked quite a discussion. And I'll, of course, when the time comes, I'll let Elk make that statement again, and you guys can respond to his viewpoint there, and then I can also give you what Tim said about it, at least from what I remember. But with all that being said, let's get into this article, and then we will hit a lot of the big points as we go along with those. All right. And again, as always, if anything in the article grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions as well. So Disney and other studios with streaming platforms work with Congress to crack down on piracy, arousing free speech concerns and ignoring the real problem. Article by J.D. Augustine, published April 27, 2024.
And what is the real problem? We'll find out. Or what they think is the real problem.
Well, we'll find that out, won't we, Rick? That's usually how it works in these articles. And there's Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force right there. Those of you might not know. This might come as a shock, but Hollywood doesn't like it when you watch their stuff without permission. Since that practice is illegal, the law is on their side, and they have a valid grievance. However, while all of here is airtight given that fact of life, there are broader implications.
I just have to say that the way that they structured that should be considered slightly incorrect, because we watch it a lot of times without the permission. Sometimes we have legal copies. Sometimes you watch it on TV, which I guess you're watching a legal copy then, or you're borrowing it from a friend, which is a legal copy.
There are some things that are public domain too.
Yeah, but I'm talking the stuff that isn't public domain. But my point is, do we have to get permission every time we watch it for whatever source, whether legal or not?
When the disc was bought, permission to watch that disc comes with the disc. It's a legal disc. If you hand it to someone else, they're carrying the permission with them.
Just like when you turn on your TV, right? You turn on your TV to watch something. The permission's already implied there.
Yes. Now, what you can't do is take that disc that you had permission to watch and go to the town square and put up a sheet on the side of a skyscraper and a projector and put it up there and let 150 people put out their lawn chairs and watch it.
Hey, Metal. Hey, good night, Spoon.
Yeah. Metal, I just woke up after only 4 hours of sleep. Ahoy there. Hey, Metal. Well, if you can join us in the studio, it would help, because I really would. But if all you can do is give us your commentary from the chat, I understand as well. Again, for this article and for some of the stuff that we'll be getting into as we get into the discussion and stuff like that, I really was looking forward to having your perspective, just as I was looking forward to having RJ's perspective as well. So that's why I was really hoping you guys could be in with us tonight. So anyways, let's continue on.
Yeah, I was just being a little facetious there with the permission.
Hi, Metal. So good night, Spoon. Hello, good night, Spoon, and then hi, Rick. All right. With that, let's continue on with the article now that we know everybody's here. Again, Metal, you're welcome to join us in the studio if you can. If you feel that you can only hang out from the chat, I understand. Anyways,
I was just gonna say, Metal. If you go into the back room, if although he's saying something here, I could probably come in after I woke up a little bit. But aside from being on Abbott Pirate, I don't really have much to say on this topic, to be honest. Okay. But I was going to say, if you come in, if you come into the back room, just comment in the main chat, and I'll let Mike know that you're there.
Yeah, because I'm splitting screens here, going back and forth, as everybody knows. So how I usually do it. So, anyways, now continuing on here. Let's see. Let's see. Oh yeah, we already read all that. So continue. All right. Disney primarily and every conglomerate with a streaming service are towing the line of those implications that involve free speech by dragging Congress into the fray. The two institutions are working together to draft another bill to combat piracy. The Motion Picture Association, in tandem with members of Congress, wants to pass, quote, judicial site blocking legislation, unquote, to stem the tide of illegal streaming that's seen a sharp increase in the last year. Not so coincidentally, streaming subscriptions have fallen in that same period. Piracy has a host of consequences the MPA is worried about. Quote, in the US alone, it, in brackets piracy, steals hundreds of thousands of jobs from workers and tens of billions of dollars from our economy, including more than $1 billion in theatrical ticket sales, unquote, said organizer, chairman, and CEO Charles Rivkin at CinemaCon via Quartz.
Now I'm going to say to that's them assuming that anybody who's got it, but illegally, would have actually paid the money to go see it in theaters or whatever. That's not necessarily the case. A lot of people, if they can't see it for free, shall we say, aren't going to go pay the money. So they're not. They could have been losing money, or they could not. It's hard to say. They're surprising that they would have got that money.
Yeah, but if the opportunity is there to watch it for nothing and you do want to see it, then why would you pay money to see it if you could see it for free? And if the people did actually go to see it, they must have wanted to see it enough to go through and watch it.
True. But if you don't have the money to go see it, are you going to go see it? Yeah. Yeah, obviously.
I don't have the money to drive a Mercedes. I don't drive a Mercedes.
True. But I'm just saying, some people who don't have the money to go to the movie, that's what they'll get it for free. And I'm just saying, those people that don't have the money to get it, maybe they shouldn't be seeing it. I agree with you there. But at the same time, they wouldn't have paid the money to go see it because they didn't.
There's a legal way to do that. There's a legal way to watch every movie that comes out for free.
Wait for it to come on TV.
No. Well, that used to be the way to do it. You wait for it to come on DVD and or Blu-ray. And then you go to your local public library and you check it out.
Yeah,
which is government paid for. And you have a whole week with the disc to watch the movie.
True. I'm not disagreeing with those points, but I'm just saying a lot of people that would get it for free, or maybe not a lot. I don't know. I won't. Not sure the statistic, but I'm just saying. And still, again, getting it from the library to watch it for free. Again, well, somebody's bought it, but those people wouldn't have paid money to go see it or to rented or whatever.
Rick, Goodnight Spoon here has a comment about you here. I didn't realize you were talking about piracy. It makes sense that you would want Rick on.
He's teasing me, of course.
That's the same way Palpatine returned, I hear.
It happened somehow.
Nothing is free. Well, it's natural, especially when you're on a fixed income or lower fixed income, to want to try to find what you want and need, for as cheap as possible. I mean, that's if it's available, people are naturally gonna take advantage of whatever opportunities are out there. But then also it comes back to the idea, well, do some of those same people who maybe engage in piracy, do they even think of it as piracy? That's another thing to think about. You don't need to answer that right now. That's another thought to kind of just.
My main point is I would really like to know how they're coming up with the money in, if it is half the way that I was surmising in my initial point there, then it might not be as much. Might not be losing as much as what they say they're losing.
Yeah. But anyways, let's continue on with the article, because there's still questions that you've asked earlier that
haven't been answered necessarily.
That haven't been answered yet. So let's continue on here. Rivkin's stated goal is to allow, quote, film, television, music, and book publishers to request in court that internet providers block websites that share illegal or stolen content, unquote, says Quartz. Sounds good, but not everybody is convinced. The MPA tried to push legislation in 2012, so 12 years ago, called the Stop Online Piracy Act, SOPA, I guess, that failed because it was feared the law would have a negative slippery slope effect on the free speech of internet users. Even Google and Wikipedia were against it, noted Quartz. Quote, with today's announcement, the MPA has made its intentions crystal clear. It wants to give itself and its members the power to force any internet infrastructure provider, up to and including broadband providers that service your home, to cut off access on websites on their say-so alone, rebutted Senior Policy Counsel at Public Knowledge, Meredith Rose, in a statement. So the fear, why people were against this, even back in 2012 when they were trying to do this back then, the reason is that they're afraid that by giving, the Motion Picture Association, Hollywood, what have you, by giving them the power, giving them that kind of power, they could literally sit there and basically just completely take over the net. They just shut you off if, so if you think about it, and the slippery slope effect, right? The slippery slope effect of that is, well, if let's say you're a Trump supporter, right? And you say a lot of good stuff about Trump and say a lot of bad, point out the negatives of people like the left, right? So then Hollywood, which is a known leftist group, they could sit there and say, well, we don't like Trump, so we're just going to cut you off. You can't, we'll make sure you can't say anything by just simply cutting you off. So,
yeah.
So that, yeah. Does anybody here have anything, they want to add to what I just said, or?
That would be the most extreme, despotic use of the law. I think the closer to fact, slippery slope of the law would be, hey, people are taking the new Marvel movie off of Pirate Bay. You should block Pirate Bay so it's not, accessible through your network. And then saying, oh, gee, the Mikestand, hosted by Mike Walters, just showed a 15-second clip of the new Marvel movie. That's copyrighted material. You should block everyone from seeing the Mike Walters show. That's where it's like, hey, wait a minute. Just because he did this doesn't mean that it's illegal. But that's more the natural path that could be followed.
Mm-hmm.
And we got Goodnight Spoon saying something in the chat here. After nothing is free, he says, "What I mean is, there's always a cost to everything. It takes time. You want to watch it with ads. It takes more of your time. You want to watch it online. They're collecting data on you. You want to steal. There are consequences. Everything costs something." True.
Yeah.
I do think it's fair to think that human nature is, just by its very nature, corrupt and negative and not necessarily positive. Because, for instance, the Mattel Corporation, when Barbie, I guess Barbie has always been getting into social commentary, but they tried at various times to use copyright and trademark law to prevent publications from publishing commentary that Barbie was having a negative impact on American girls and so on. And so I think it is legitimate to say that powerful people, given the same opportunity to exercise power as the powerless majority of us, will exploit that opportunity. So yeah, I think that is a fair point.
And I'm sure we'll talk more about that later after we get through the article. Especially when we bring up, like when I bring up the kind of the back and forth you and Tim had a couple weeks ago when we were covering this. I'm sure we'll hit that even more then when we get into that. So anyways, continuing on with the article here. So I need to go down again. Let's see. Quote, "We oppose any attempt to ram through censorious legislation developed entirely in secret without the public hearing the harsh consequences of this previously failed proposal. This needs to happen out in the open so that the public can see all the ways in which this proposal is fundamentally and irredeemably flawed," unquote, her statement added. Protecting free speech to some people comes with the false assumption we have to let piracy run wild and unabated. But while the practice might be on the rise and costs show business reported tens of billions, cracking down on it doesn't address the root problem. So here's to the question you were asking earlier, Rick. What is the real problem, or what is the root problem? Real problem. The piracy in question on the rise is of streaming content, and this trend correlates with the rise in the prices of streaming subscriptions. As Professor Michael D. Smith of Carnegie Mellon University put it to Quartz, quote, "It's hard to get people to pay for something that they know they can get for free," unquote, which is a point we made earlier. And that's true. And there have been. Okay, let me make this one statement quickly, Rick, and then you can chime in. And that is true, because even I've seen in some of the news coverage and some of the things I've seen, yes, some of the subscription services keep raising the prices to the point where people are having more of a harder time, paying for those subscriptions. All right, Rick, go ahead.
Now, my question was going to be for this. They're talking about streaming. Are they talking like places like Pluto or what's the other one? Tubi versus like Amazon Prime, Netflix. That's the question.
Pluto and Tubi are free, and they still are free to this point. But I have heard, and RJ, you might know this too. I don't know if you would or not, but I think from what I've heard, like Netflix, Crunchyroll, Amazon. Some of these sites are actually have been raising their price. I know, in fact,
Yeah.
I know Crunchyroll, because Rick, I think you and I did an article on the Crunchyroll situation.
Yeah. But what I more mean is they're talking about streaming for free. I don't think they mean somebody like us, going around and streaming, a whole movie for free. Now, or are they talking about somebody like you or me versus, Pluto or Tubi, which are free for people to watch and stream stuff from, or are they versus, like Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus, all that? Do you know what they're talking about for the people that are quote unquote streaming this stuff for free?
I'm not even fully sure of what your question is myself. I don't think they're talking as much about Tubi or Pluto or those services,
Well,
because those
they're
are
clearly talking about Pirate Bay,
Or places like Pirate Bay?
BitTorrent.
Yeah. Torrent sites.
Yeah. See. This is why
Yeah.
I felt I needed you on, RJ, because you know some of these stuff that
Yeah.
I don't. It's like
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
always
because
get
if they were watching it on Tubi and YouTube, because YouTube has free movies as well, then there wouldn't be the complaint, because guess what? Those aren't for free. Those are actually being paid for by the advertisements that are being interjected into the movie.
Yeah. Technically, yeah. It's just the way that they put it. It's like I wasn't quite sure, Obviously, I thought of torrents, but the way that they say streaming, I didn't really think of Pirate Bay and other torrent sites.
Well, there are also streaming sites. I mean, if you get an Amazon Fire Stick, and I know people who have them, and it's not me, but they can you can basically crack an Amazon Fire Stick. Now you have access to an entire network of streaming sites that I have a friend who watches movies, and she's got to watch them with Russian subtitles because it's coming from a site out of Russia. Now, what's happening here? She's watching the movie, she's getting the Russian subtitles on there, and there's a little banner at the top that's talking about all the casinos that you can log on to and pay. That's how they're making their money. They're making their money by putting these ads on here and giving you a free movie, which basically they've stolen from Hollywood producers and reproduced and put it onto this illegal server overseas, where it's very, very difficult to enforce copyright.
All right. Well, there are some comments here. Let's see what the chat has had to say. So, Goodnight Spoon saying, I think corruption is a different discussion. Corruptible people are drawn to power. I don't believe everyone is corrupted or would be given the opportunity. Well, I think the point I would argue, and I know Rick and maybe RJ would agree with me, for those who were raised in or those who've had some exposure to Christianity, there's always the thought that as human beings, we are actually born corrupt. We're born with what is known as a sinful nature. So, and I've said, and I know this has also been said in the Bible. I say this quite a bit too. In our own human reasoning, right? In our own human reasoning, we can justify any behavior, good, bad, or indifferent. So, but yeah. Let's see. Goodnight Spoon says, I pay for Netflix, Disney, and Amazon, but I never watch them. I only watch Pluto TV and rarely Tubi.
I'm stuck on Netflix all the time. I just go there. I've got the entire Roku network to go through. I just go, everything I want to watch is on Netflix.
And then so this now Metal, who claims to be more of the piracy expert here. And I'll take his word for it, because I've had some discussions with him on it, and he seems pretty knowledgeable on it. So so this is what Metal has to say about it. The biggest combatant to piracy has always been accessibility. piracy had actually taken a nosedive due to streaming services until there started becoming too many of them and turned into new cable. RJ, did you what do you have to say about what Metal just
Well,
said?
I'm old enough to remember when the music industry was really concerned about piracy, and the thing that pretty much put the last shovel of dirt on music piracy was streaming, digital streaming, both with iTunes and things like Pandora. I listen to Pandora music all the time. I can pick any music I want to listen to. I can hear the songs. I have it for free uh, because I am perfectly willing to put up
Mhm.
with a 30-second ad every 10 minutes. Not a problem for me. It's like listening to the
Yeah,
radio.
Same here.
With
yeah.
with
Well,
the
I know
streaming services for
on
movies,
YouTube,
yeah,
if you really want to listen to a specific song, you can just type it in on YouTube too, and listen
there's
to it as
that.
well.
Because you know what? Guess what? You got pop-up ads. Now you may not look at them, you may not read them, but they're there. Uh,
Yeah.
with the movies that were being streaming, yeah, it dropped off because it was like $7 a month, $8 a month to have Netflix, and it had everything on it. And it was like, well, okay, I wanna get, the stuff that's showing on Amazon Prime that's not showing on Netflix because Amazon was making their own stuff. And then, like they said, there were so many of them that they would get exclusive deals, and they wouldn't all get the same exclusive deal. You'd have all the Warner Brothers stuff might be funneling into HBO Max because they own HBO Max.
Mhm.
So they took all their stuff off of Netflix. Disney might say, hey, all those Marvel movies, we're taking them off of Netflix because we want to put them on
Mhm.
Disney Plus and put them out here. So now you have to, if you want to watch, 4 different movies, you've got to pay $8 to each one of these things. And pretty
Mhm.
much you're at the point of new
Yeah.
cable.
Well, yeah, and
Now, Warner and Disney,
I think Metal makes a very good point on the accessibility aspect of it because you know part of it is if you're moving stuff around, but then also there's stuff that maybe you want to see. It's like we're talk like I know a lot of the piracy talk, right? Is talking more about like newer
yeah.
stuff that's been produced more recently.
Well, how long does it take a show to land
Let's
on
say you
streaming?
don't want. Let's say you're not as keen into watching. Let's say you like watching older stuff, right? Let's say you Let's say you want to watch, maybe some old, Looney Tunes cartoons or some old, or some old, even some old, some of the Harvey Toon stuff that Famous Studios did back in the 50s. That was initially distributed by Paramount. All right, not always easy to find them now of late. Of course, now they just made an announcement that Me TV is doing their own Cartoon Network, as it were. Um, but but accessibility is another key issue there that I think Metal
Yeah,
made
they
that.
they started being accessible, and then there were so many that the movies started getting spread thin through them and exclusive to the different networks. You got Peacock and Paramount, so that you had to basically say, "I like this channel more than the others." Warner and Disney Plus are already in talks to consolidate and have a streaming service that's Disney Plus, Max, and some of the other stuff. And it's like they basically deconstructed the cable service, put it out on streamings, and then brought all the streaming back together for a higher
Mhm.
price than you were paying for cable.
Right.
That's how they
So,
got you off of cable.
all right. So before we continue with the article and so I follow the 4 precepts of Buddhism according to Goodnight Spoon here. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Um, Zune forever.
Zune. I remember Zune.
Oh yeah, I
Oh.
also pay for YouTube Premium. Um, if you're monetized, you're welcome. Let's
I
see.
think the only one
I've
here,
got,
we
I've got the
monetized is
concealed
RJ.
subscription.
I'm not even monetized. They took that from me.
Yeah. I'm not even not close enough to be monetized yet, but Metal then says LMAO sounds like GKS.
Good night, Spoon.
Oh, and then Street Sharks is on Tubi. Yeah. Well, I
So
also,
they took-
I also know, like, for me, I watch Tubi too. Like, I used Tubi to watch the original Dark Shadows series back in the late 60s, early 70s. But anyways, why don't we get back to the article, get through more of this article. So then, okay, so continuing on with the article here, then there's eminent domain. Then there's the eminent domain aspect to consider, where no personal ownership of the content exists. You don't keep what isn't yours, and the studio it all belongs to can yeet anything off their platform at their leisure. If people are denied, say, Westworld or Space Ghost Coast to Coast or physical media, and they want it bad enough, they are going to find ways to watch them, no matter how many firewalls and barricades are in the way. Yes, and that's actually a point that we talked about too before. I think it was Tim who brought it up in one of our previous discussions, going back the whole thing that was going on between Metallica and Napster, where there was, where there was that whole mess going on, and I guess, people still ended up finding a way to quote unquote pirate it,
Yeah, well, the thing is, and I know it's probably not quite the same case. Before these streaming things came along, people used to record, movies off of TV or music off the radio. It's not slightly different, I know, but
Yeah, there's not the mass distribution that's actual piracy at this point.
yeah.
Now, I think the founding into comics writer was a bit hasty in writing all of this, because there is no eminent domain aspect to consider. There is public domain aspect to consider, but eminent domain, that's when the government says we're going to take your house because we're going to put the highway through here, and it's for the public good to do that.
Yeah.
I don't see how that applies.
He may just have had the wrong word there.
Yeah.
But the writer of this article, just to remind you, was J.B. Augustine. So send your you can email him to tell, hey, you used the wrong term here, buddy. Okay, so let's get back
We got a few more comments from Goodnight Spoon and Metal.
All right, as soon as I can click back over to the. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, GKS. Let's see. I usually have the Next Generation on at all times. Yeah, the
By Next Generation, do you mean Star Trek?
I would imagine that
Or
would be what
Degrassi.
Goodnight Spoon then says, I was on a Mighty Ducks kick a few weeks back. I found out they made a Disney Plus series. Went to watch it. After D3, nope. Disney yeeted it for taxes. Let's see. The metal then chimes in. A large chunk of video game piracy is of stuff you generally can't get access to legally because it is no longer in circulation anywhere aside from these illicit archives. Again, the point I was making earlier. Yeah, some things you can't get because they're out of circulation, and so maybe the only way to actually get it is to quote unquote pirate it. I am disappointed. Good night. I do pirate video games to play on my phone. If they make it available, they make it available to pay money, I will gladly pay. Yeah, well, more power to you then, my friend. All right, so let's see. Continuing on, let's see. And they want it bad. They're always going to. Okay, yeah. But those are examples. Of old shows. You probably say, What about new stuff? Assuming that's a serious question. We know how that's working out for them, especially Disney. Never has there been more of a glut in the offerings of IPs they own, such as Star Wars and Marvel. Moreover, never have there been greater complaints and disillusionment from fans over the quality and forced messaging layered deliberately within the programming. And I know that this is true because you could argue it was a little bit of what we were talking about with the X-Men 97 series earlier. I know a number of commentators, including Yellow Flash and There Are Dark, have also talked about this stuff. I'm sure Mel has talked about it on his channel too, where where part of the problem is sometimes when you watch newer stuff and they're they're trying to preach to you instead of entertain you, people are not going to want to watch that. But turning their backs, fans are shutting it off and canceling their Disney Plus bundles. Hollywood can't take them for granted anymore and may be faced with a more serious crisis soon, figuring out how to win the viewers back, assuming they care. So basically, some people might pirate the stuff because they'd rather watch older stuff that they grew up with than newer stuff where they're getting preached at. And there's of course the old Space Coast to Coast from Hanna-Barbera, 1966. If not, and all signs say the content purveyors don't, then they literally have cooked their golden goose. All right. So with that aspect of it, okay. So one of the things where we got onto the copyright aspect of it when we were doing this, so Elk had made a statement that Tim kind of, I don't know if you want to call it, took offense to, or just kind of lit a fire under him. Let's say lit a fire under him. Let's say Elk had basically made the statement that he believes copyright should only be for 10 years. That when a creator makes something, well, I should have. Okay, Elk, if you can hear me, why don't you kind of explain your position? Because
Sure. I don't want to meander too much. But yeah, what I said, I pulled a number out of the air. I did a little research in the interim, but originally copyright until the turn of the last century was for 14 years. I thought it was about 10, and I thought it should be about 10. There's a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that for the vast overwhelming number of published works of fact or fiction, they only really get profit. They only derive their profits from the first year of publication or of the first year of putting it in movie theaters and so on. And virtually the first weekend it's in a movie theater is usually where most of the profit comes from a given work. That's just one reason, but there are lots of reasons, and there are reasons that copyright was only extended to 14 years, and back in even the 1910s, 1920s, when Sherlock Holmes was around. It was first extended to a 28-year period instead of 14 years. Then it was given a 28-year period and then another renewal period of another 28 years. And then it was only in 76, due to the Disney Corporation's lobbying, that it became for the lifetime of an author plus 50 years, which I think is just an abysmal act of public policy. For one, it's American. And unfortunately, because Hollywood and the Motion Picture Association and American publishing dominates at least English language media, if not all media around the world, especially Hollywood. So they were able to force copyright changes onto other countries through the World Trade Organization. If you wanted to stay in good with the World Trade Organization, you had to adopt American style copyright laws, which other countries sooner or later fell in line with. Canada in particular was incredibly weak in that aspect. But I mean, there are a lot of good reasons why copyright should only last 10 or 15 years. It's an abysmal, and it should be a criminal restriction on freedom of speech and freedom of artistic expression. And for one, I mean, and the one great example we have of why copyright should never have been extended is provided over and over again by the corporation that did the most to extend it, the Disney Corporation.
Okay. Okay, Elk. I think we got your point. Let me kind of tell Rick and RJ here. What Tim's response was, since Tim unfortunately can't be here to share his response. Tim actually found the whole idea of a 10-year copyright as a creator, found the whole idea of a 10-year copyright and having to renew it every 10 years as being somewhat preposterous, because he feels, well, why should I have, on something that he created, right? On something that he created, why should he have to re-secure his rights like every 10 years? That's the gist of what. And I know you and I talked about it off camera before. RJ, you had some interesting things to say on the whole copyright, and I know a lot of people brought up the whole thing with Disney and how they basically abused and that, I think, where Elk is going here too. But now, RJ, I want you to chime in, but before you do, I just saw that Metal had a couple comments here. So let's see.
So did Explain.
Copyleft is similar to the concept of open source when you can use it as long as you. Oh.
Not where
you can use it as long as you leave your derivation also open to be used in the same way, similar to Creative Commons.
Yeah, Metal has something adapted something that the Japanese have for this called Darjan, or I brought it up the other day. It's on its site. If he wants to type it in the chat and maybe let people know exactly what it is, I think you'll know what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah. Because I know it's kind of funny because, and Elk was pointing out the whole Japanese copyright, how things were more like they can get away more with doing more fan fiction on that, but that's not entirely true, because Japan has some pretty strict copyright issues too. Because you just look at Toho, and they've gone after some people before. So
yeah,
but I think Metal would be better. Could better explain that than I could. They did name the practice for the pun, though. Let's see. They should have named it something people would take seriously, like open source.
And then Metal's got the thing.
Yeah. Dojinshi, which means self-published in Japan, and then Kintsugi. Okay. Now, it would help if Metal was in here in the studio with us, and he could explain this even without typing it all out. We could hear him, but I understand. But anyways, RJ, I kind of mentioned this little debate to you the other day. You had some things to say on the copyright issues and the whole thing with Disney and stuff like that. So did you want to reiterate that for everybody else here?
The original 10-year copyright was set up by the founding fathers when we didn't quite have the global distribution. I mean, we were just getting printing presses going here, and people didn't quite live as long at that point. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what purpose does a shorter copyright? What purpose does a 10-year copyright serve anyone who's not the author?
Oh, could I answer that?
I was hoping you would.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's so many examples. All they seem to go back to two sources: Disney and Sherlock Holmes. And Disney is such a provider of so many examples. Star Wars. When Star Wars was the second movie I ever saw as a kid. It was the first movie I saw the whole way through because my dad, a conservative Christian, went to took me to see Airplane the week before, and I didn't remember anything about Airplane except my dad walked me out of it in the first 5 minutes. And we walked back in to see Star Wars 2 weeks later. The person at the movie theater, it being a small town, said, "I think you'll like this movie better than the last one." And I saw it, and I have been in love with it for the rest of my life.
Okay, but
And
if Star Wars had a 10-year copyright, what would that have done for you?
that means Disney could not shit all over Star Wars 50 years later when I'm an
Why
old
couldn't they?
man. And well, they
Actually,
could go ahead.
they could do
But
it easier.
every other creator in North America, like me, for whom that artistic expression enthralls me, and it leads me towards my own artistic expression. It leads my own imagination to what would Han and Luke and Leia be doing now, 50 years later?
So
There
no
could
one
be a
can
whole
write fan
universe
fiction.
of other stories. And Disney could still tell.
Let's
Disney could still
let's-
tell stories.
That's cool. We're back and forth. So copyright prevents people from writing fan fiction.
Yes, why can sure Disney never loses anything. Copyright doesn't give you rights to what you've created. It prevents people explicitly from creating their own creations. It's not a copyright over what you've created. I'm not saying I should be able to go bootleg a Han Solo, a Star Wars story down at the flea market and print up my own copies. I'm saying, sure, Disney should actually keep creation over their own creations. They shouldn't be able to prevent me and millions of other people who are only going to live on this planet once. And our culture is only going to be defined for us once. And why are the cultural touchstones of our lives that inspire artistic creation and imagination owned by a effing foreign corporation that hates me because of what color I am and what politics I espouse? And
For the reason they own Star, the reason they own Star Wars.
I don't care that they own Star Wars. Why can I not do my own Star Wars? What they own their own
give Rick a chance to answer you. Give Rick a chance to answer you, Elk.
Well, I was going to say the reason they own Star Wars is, of course, George Lucas sold out. That's
the reason they own it is because they were able to lobby corruptly the U.S. Congress, an incredibly corrupt organization, in 1976 to create a bunch of.
But they didn't own Star Wars in 1976. In fact, Star Wars didn't even exist until 1976.
Yes, but they lobbied that, and it's the Disney Corporation bought those things with the intention. And the counter example is there's lots of irony in Disney being the ones behind this. Primarily that Disney squats on the 19th century non-copyrighted materials of entire cultures, especially Germanic, especially Northern Germanic cultures. Hans Christian Andersen, the Brothers Grimm, most of their movies from the first 50 years of their existence were public domain stories taken from the 19th century, which they have so squatted on and locked up behind walls of lawyers.
Okay. Well, let's take Disney.
Hold on. Let's go to Rick first, then RJ, and then we'll see where we'll go from there. It's kind of getting to where everybody's kind of talking over each other, so kind of get a little organized here. So Rick, then RJ, and then we'll go from there.
I was just going to say, let's take Disney out of the equation. Yes, Disney is a bad organization, however you want to put it. They do a lot of negative with things. They've lobbied. They've done what they've done for right or wrong. But what about all the other creators like me, the independent creators, all the small creators that there are? a 10-year, for me, if copyright only lasted 10 years, my Canadian Shield would have been gone long ago out of my hands. Because it's taken me 30 years just to get the first book in.
Oh, do you want to answer that, RJ, or do you want me to take a kick at it?
No, I'm
that's
of
actually
the
kind
same
of the
opinion.
yeah. I mean
Because I'm
that's
like,
kind of the point.
Sure,
Tim was
I
making,
have it.
too.
I mean, you could argue, Rick. Unfortunately, I don't think you own a Canadian Shield. Canadian Shield is a tall guy in a white suit with a red maple leaf on his chest and a cape. That's Captain Canuck, who was created back in the 50s. He's also a Christian, which Captain Canuck was also a conservative Christian. I don't think he's unique enough for you to own him. But
I own my Canadian Shield. I don't own anybody else's, but I own.
I don't think you could prevent anyone from having a guy in a white suit with a maple leaf on his chest and a cape.
Yeah,
because
I could prevent them from doing mine. I can prevent them from doing mine. I can't prevent them to creating a Canadian Shield, but I can prevent them from doing mine.
Canadian Shield is a rock we all live on. I'm not saying you shouldn't be able to own more copies of Canadian Shield. I'm saying other people should be able to create. And the other short version is that whatever profits you were going to make from Canadian Shield, you were going to make in the first 10 years anyway. So to be honest, if a conventional
I've made more profit it's 30 years and I've made more profit now than I did in the first 10 years.
So let's see. The last Harry Potter book came out in 2007. We can assume that since 2017, J.K. Rowling's made nothing.
No, all those books, all the millions of books she sells, like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and I can't remember the last ones. No, I'm not saying she shouldn't own those. Copyright doesn't give you ownership over what you've just created. It prevents other people from creating their own artistic expressions. So if I wanted to write a Harry Potter story, or if what is a great author, Len Dayton, or if someone else. Yes, it does. Copyright does stop you.
No, it doesn't stop you from doing that. It just stops you from making money on it.
No, it doesn't. The thing is as a practical effect, you can do fan fiction online, but that's only because lawyers don't have the time and effort to send you cease and desist lawyers. You don't have that right. For another, we're talking about American copyright law, which if you take the Sherlock Holmes case, Sherlock Holmes is only protected by copyright in one country around the whole world. Guess what world that is? It's stories after 1923 published in the United States. And guess where Hollywood is in the Motion Picture Association? And guess where the so quote unquote Conan Doyle Estate Corporation, which is under heavy dispute whether they own whatever rights to Doyle anyway, but they squat on the rights and threaten with lawsuits corporations as big as movie companies, threatening to interfere with their right to publish movies over this fallacious so-called ownership of the last 23 years of written Doyle works from after 1923, even though all of the rest of the Arthur Conan Doyle material is no longer protected by copyright. So I'm not saying J.K. Rowling should be able to make money off Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, or Harry Potter and the disappearing Black Princess, or the conventionally gay Dumbledore, or whatever BS she wants to, whatever she creates. I'm not saying she shouldn't have the right to own it. She should have the right to own it. But every other author in England, every other author in Canada, every other author in China, every other author in India should be able to do their own creation. And if they write a Harry Potter story, why not let them create it? The world would be a richer place.
Elk. Hold on a second. Metal had something to say here. I want to get this in there. Maybe get a couple of these other articles, and I want RJ to kind of respond to what RJ. You see why I wanted you here? Can you understand why I wanted you here?
I see. You know I'm on blood pressure medication, right? Come on.
I am too. So according to Metal here, you actually do have the right to C&D fanfics under our legal system if you spend the time and money. All right, and then good night. Unfortunately, you're both wrong. Copyright holders are obligated to protect the IPs regardless of whether or not you're making money on your fan fiction. It's only the last 10 years it's been get. Um,
Getting.
My understanding, that's not IP. That's actually trademarks. That's the case. That's not
A lot of people
copyright.
get that confused as well.
Yeah.
Ting Fuzzy, and then
IP is a fuzzy word.
Yeah.
That
Good night,
means
Spoon. If
something.
you don't protect your IP, you can lose the right to protect it in the
IP
future.
is an illegal word. That's kind of a made up word. It's trademarks that you lose your protection on if you don't protect it.
Well,
and that's not what copyright
IP is used more in as more of a
It's a
way
conflation of two
intellectual
different
property.
terms.
I think it's more of a concept. But anyways, RJ, do you have anything to say on what we've just been kind of bantering about here the last couple minutes here?
Intellectual property is an umbrella term. I mean, it covers copyrights, trademarks, patents, and trade secrets, and there's a whole school of law that's all intellectual property. But this is going back, and this is going to sound a tad cruel, but this basically speaks to the point of I want to write my story with your idea. So it's like I have a story that I just can't write if Mickey Mouse isn't the star. I have a story that can only be told if Sherlock Holmes is the detective.
That I do. I accept that point, but I think the way you can dispute that most easily is the way the Duke Law School article disputes that with Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse was not invented by Disney. Mickey Mouse was actually named after a Buster Keaton movie called Steamboat Billy, as opposed to Steamboat Willie. And his costume is a pastiche of various what you call the black entertainment, the blackface. His whole costume and persona is a pastiche of blackface performers who are popular comedians at the time. His whole shtick, his own writers have said that he's actually they thought about what Buster Keaton would have done in that, or Douglas Fairbanks Jr. They said, what would Douglas Fairbanks Jr. have done and Charlie Chaplin have done? And that's how they came up with the character of Steamboat Willie. So I'm just saying is why do you let one group of people obviously steal? And again, and Canadian Shield is again, it's a superhero in a cape with a red maple leaf. That's a Canadian flag, for Pete's sake. But why is Steamboat Willie, whose name was taken from a film called Steamboat Billy, which I think would actually even fail American copyright law now. But, and again, he is copied after Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks Jr., two popular entertainers, and it's copied after a plethora of blackface comedians whose white gloves and blackface and over-exaggerated white eyes were used. There's bugger all that's original in Mickey Mouse. So why does
copyright a style? You can't copyright a style, and parody has always been protected. And both of those would cover Steamboat Willie.
So go for a step beyond that. Now Steamboat Willie 1.0 is in public domain, apparently even with the white gloves. But I don't think the idea was he should have been protected for, and that's the other thing. The other argument I did want to make that's a bit distinct is that we are not human beings that live for centuries. And when they're talking about copyright law, Disney introduced this concept of a lifetime plus 50 years. And they tried to introduce under the Sonny Bono Act, a lifetime plus 98 years for copyright protection. We're human beings. We only last we really are only adults for maybe 70 years at best, realistic 60, 50, a lot more of us
the original 70.
Yeah, a lot of more of us die sooner than that than we want to. So the cultural creations of our own lifetimes are stolen away from us by American copyright law, and I'm not even American.
Oh, okay. Here's a phrase
Okay.
I keep hearing from you, which is cultural creations.
RJ, let me just say something here before you make your point. Because there is something that you and I talked to that I want you to bring up as well. I think we'll go into some of what we're talking about here too, and it's something I think Rick was kind of getting at, and Tim was getting at when we were having this discussion the other day. When I talked to you the other day, you said something of You said something that I think really would hit a lot of the points that everybody's making hit home. So, would you like to remind everybody for everybody?
You're gonna have to remind me what it was.
Well, what is copyright for in the first place? Why do we have copyright law in the first place?
It's to protect the writer from losing control of their creations.
Yeah, but there was something else you said there too that I think also, went into.
Well, I hope your recall is better than mine because I didn't.
The point you made was that the reason some people were saying lifetime in 50 years was to give, like the family members as well as the creators themselves a means to
Well, yeah, I
support
mean,
themselves.
if I create the next Doctor Who, I would love to be able to send my child to college based off of what I make on that. Instead, I'm going to be looking at my baby at the moment I'm writing a Doctor Who, and God help me if I'm looking at a baby because I'm 56 years old now, and it'd be like, this would have sent you to college, but I'm sorry, I'm going to lose control of it when you're in 5th grade.
That's one thing I actually dispute. And this, I take some Japanese commentary. We're all going on the understanding that if we allow Creative Commons licensing of things, that the original rights holder will actually make less money. I would dispute the complete opposite. And this goes for most creations most of the time. Most first authors publish one novel and they're never heard of again, or they publish two at most, and they're never heard of again. Well, what if you write your detective story set in 1980s Miami, and then someone else, Len Dayton, writes a novel set with Crockett and Tubbs in Miami using your characters in 1980s Miami, and then someone picks up Len Dayton's script and turns it into a TV series. All that's going to mean is your original novel, whatever you've created, Miami Vice, is going to sell astronomically more copies if copied by a creative individual or group of individuals than if you're the only one working on it. I would dispute the idea that the assumption that we're operating on, that you can only make money, or you're going to make more money if you don't have a Creative Commons license on it. It's like, and I completely reject that idea. I think for most people, in most cases, the opposite is true, because most people are not very good fiction writers. And if they write a work of fiction and a great author, like who's the Sandman, the comic author? I can't believe.
Neil Gaiman.
Neil Gaiman. If Neil Gaiman picks up a version like A Study in Emerald, like he did of Sherlock Holmes, if he picks up your novel about Crockett and Tubbs in Miami, and your first novel went nowhere, then suddenly people are going to go back and they're going to pick up your first novel. They're going to want the whole series. They're going to want to see all the different versions of their favorite character. And that's why I think if people who are 50 years old and white and male and somewhat conservative, if at least at one time in their life, and they wrote a version of Star Wars right now, I think that film would do $1 billion or $2 billion in the movie theater. But I don't think Disney would lose money. I think the next time Disney put out Han Solo, a Star Wars story about Lando the pansexual, that it would actually do much, much better than Han Solo, a Star Wars story, starring whatever lesbian robot they put as the main character of the next Han Solo story. I think that would make Disney more money. And I think, again, going back to the example of Disney is a gift that just keeps giving because it keeps shooting itself in the foot. And there's actually a legal reason why it does shoot itself in the foot, why it does go for diversity. And that's actually another point that, if you'll indulge me, I'll make, and that there is actual legal arguments have been made in copyright cases that allowing earlier Creative Commons, that allowing copyright protection to lapse early, gives the opportunity to quote unquote more diverse voices to use the original source material. And that means minorities, and that means women, and that means the heart and soul of most of the political powerful movements in American politics in the last 30 or 40, if not 50 years. So I would go beyond saying it's a coincidence that Disney has adopted this diverse voices idea and say that it's actually an aspect of them trying to legally protect their copyrights by doing an end run over the argument that limiting copyright protection would limit diverse voices from having access to the material. Because there are court cases, again, in this Duke University article that lists it, that say that those arguments have been made. So it's not an accident Disney is adopting diverse voices. They're worried if they don't adopt diverse voices, they're going to lose their copyright, because that is where the heart and soul of American political power has been. For the last 50 years, maybe 30 years, at least the last 20, has been in this idea of diverse voices. So yeah.
Elk, what I want to do is I want to hear RJ's response to what you just said here. So RJ, can you kind of
There's a lot. First of all, I bristle at the idea of this cultural environment that says, you created something, damn, that was good, that's ours now. And that's like, saying, wow, you made a really great chocolate cake, we're going to cut some slices out of that.
That's what Disney did to Cinderella and the Hunchback of
Notre
Dame.
Elk.
Disney did that with the imagery. Anyone can write a Cinderella story. Anyone can write the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Those are public domain stories. Your Cinderella cannot be wearing that colored dress with that look, and that gets into the trademark of the character and the copyright of the artwork. But anyone can print Cinderella. Anyone can, retell the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Dumas is not going to come barreling down on your door saying, my character, my character. Now, if he's wearing a little green tunic and he's got the little sniff in his eye there, and Esmeralda's wearing her gypsy outfit, yeah, Disney's going to come say, our characters.
Yeah.
But it's tied to a specific look.
Well, it's funny how you use the Cinderella example there, RJ, because I'm reminded, and I'm sure you guys may have seen this cartoon before. Fleischer actually did a Cinderella adaptation with Betty Boop. In fact, it was, I think, the one color Betty Boop cartoon. Betty Boop as Cinderella. So I think that goes more to the point you just made, RJ. Continue, RJ. Please continue.
Well, I was just, that was my point, is that Disney has a copyright on a version of Cinderella, but they didn't, end up staking these public domain stories to the ground and saying these are ours now. This version of it is ours now.
Well, again, I hate to make these appeal to authority arguments, but I do only make them out of some humility, because I have to admit I did some research, and I'm not saying my research makes me an authority or it's an appeal to authority. I'm just saying that it's not something I pulled out of my head or knew all along in my life. And that is, there is a lot of scholarship around the fact that there is the way copyright law is supposed to work, which is exactly as you're describing it, where, you'll only have copyright on that particular version. You don't have trademark protection for this unless it interferes with the understanding of the public, if that's created by Disney or not Disney, and so on. But the reality, and lawyers, especially American lawyers, have simply acknowledged it, and they've acknowledged it most openly in the Sherlock Holmes case. This organization called the Conan Doyle Estate, CDE Incorporated, has been suing people into oblivion for half a century without with most legal scholars saying, yeah, they don't have a good case. It's simple that no one smaller than a movie studio, and even an American movie studio, simply has the money to spend tens of thousands of dollars a month to protect themselves against a copyright infringement case, followed by a well-sourced American legal team.
Yeah.
So
And of
in
course,
effect,
that's ending this year.
yeah. Yeah, in 22 or something, 19. Yeah, so I mean, and again, this is again an injustice, a cultural injustice, dare I say, where even the law is circumspect to the point where they would say, "Oh no, you can't. Disney can't really own Cinderella. They just own their version of Cinderella," and that is the niceties of the law. But wait until you try to put out your Cinderella movie. And wait until you get a lawsuit that's going to cost you $350,000 just to hear it, and that's without appeals. So that's simply taking something, and again, it comes down to your idea of the corruptness of human nature. Those with power, I think, will exercise it unjustly as well as justly, as intended or as they can. And I think human beings exercise power as they can, as we let them, as we make them, not as we
As a
wish.
matter of fact, Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella is available on DVD, and Amazon Original did their own version of Cinderella, which is not Disney either.
Well,
You'll notice that when Disney does Cinderella, it's Disney Cinderella.
Amazon Original is the second largest corporation on the earth right now, after like Aramco, the Saudi Arabian oil company. So what Amazon can do does not mean I can do it. I can't put out my version of Disney because there are many, many grounds that Disney could say I had the color of this character, or even I had this or that feature of the original work in Cinderella that's copyrightable because it only appeared first in Disney's Cinderella versus the other versions. And I guess there is one other point that I'd like to throw out, just because I think it's strong, where I'm saying this idea of there's a cultural loss to what we're losing. And that is most of Shakespeare's plays. I think anyone here who loves fiction or loves anything in the English language sooner or later has loved a Shakespeare work, even though hilariously, so often like West Side Story or something, they never knew it was from Shakespeare. But Shakespeare's original works, Romeo and Juliet, The Taming of the Shrew, The Tempest, none of these works Shakespeare would not have been allowed to write in his lifetime under Walt Disney's Copyright Infringement Act, because they were all derivative of Christopher Marlowe and other earlier playwrights who were still alive at the time that he was writing. Shakespeare stole almost all his stuff from other writers. And so we as English speakers would be without the common cultural heritage that Shakespeare provided. And think of all the other Shakespeares that are out there, the Shakespeare of Star Wars, dare I say it. Because again, I'm only going to live once. I only saw so many movies when I was 10 years old. And they're not going to be the same when I'm 50. Something new, like that horrible one that just came out that was a Star Wars knockoff by Scott Snyder, or
know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, sure, maybe if I were 8 years old, I'd be impressed by that movie. And sometimes I watch science fiction and think that. Now I think it's cheesy. When I was 8 years old and I saw it the first time, what would I have thought of it? But that's not how human life works. We live once, and what our culture produces is what we have.
Yeah.
I was just going to say one thing about stuff that's public domain that everybody can use. One thing that's been used lots over various different media shows and all that, and had several different movies. Charles Dickens.
A Christmas Carol.
Yeah. So that's been done a lot, So it is possible to do this stuff and not get sued, by somebody or whatever. Yes, unfortunately, some corporations are going to go and abuse their power or their money to be able to sue people into oblivion. DC did it to Fawcett with, Captain Marvel.
The original.
And they would have lost that lawsuit, but they had more money.
Most of them sign non-disclosure agreements, and you never hear about the lawsuit. We never hear about the tens of hundreds of people who tried to cross Disney and signed an NDA.
Yeah.
Gina Carano is the one glaring exception because they were dumb enough to do it openly and call her nasty words openly. They quietly get you and your lawyer into the same room and you're never heard of again. Like Scarlett O'Hara, where she pulled that move where she tried to sue Disney directly instead of Marvel and claimed she only had an NDA agreement with Marvel over her complaints about her compensation in her movie. So she sued Disney directly. And then she said, oh, well, I'm not covered by my NDA because I'm suing Disney. I'm not suing Marvel. And okay, she's Scarlett Johansson at the end of her career, not at the beginning, at the end of her career, where she's worth a couple of $100 million. Only then can someone in Hollywood, as rich as an actor, stand up to Disney. And she disappeared after a few weeks of that, and boom, that was over. We never heard about it again.
Yeah, and that's wrong, obviously. But unfortunately, those in power have always held it over those. Or those with money have always held it over those who haven't had money or power. And unfortunately, it's been the way of things for thousands of years.
He who has the gold makes the rules.
Yeah. Well, based on in the two conversations that we've had on this, what the first with Tim, Falcon, myself, and this one here. This is my overall impressions of some of what I've heard. My impression of what Elk is getting at is this: is that because corporations behave badly, everybody should suffer. Basically creators don't have a right to their own creations because Disney, were a bunch of corrupt jerks.
Well, and here's where it really went off the rails, and it had nothing to do with copyright or trademark. Well, maybe trademark, but it had nothing to do with copyright. And that is that we gave copyright to people. And then in a separate case, we made corporations a person.
So, and your contention, RJ, that copyright was originally intended for people, not corporations.
Yeah, for the writer, for the creator, for the filmmaker, for the photographer, for the artist. But then when the art became the property of a production studio, a corporation that's recognized as an individual entity, now you've got a company that's a creator, which a company can't create anything. It's all done by committee, but it's owned by the company. Like the company has breath and life and blood, and just is this walking aggregation of humans connected together into a body. And it's why it's called a corporation. It's literally the body.
Like a corpus delicti.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, I obviously, because I just stated, I know, we know Elk's position. We know that he believes that, copyright should just be 10 years. Okay. But taking into account what we've been talking about and what copyright is for, what the purpose of copyright is for, as creator, because I know, RJ, you're a creator. Rick's a creator, and and Tim gave his perspective as a creator before too. As creators, what do you think? Do you think copyright should be just 10 years? Do you guys think it should be lifetime plus 50 years? Do you think it should be somewhere in between? Especially taking into account with what you were telling me, the whole idea of providing for one's family.
It should be lifetime plus something if I want to will it to my estate, and especially if it's going to be a continuing project. I don't want to create a character and put a book out there, and then 12 years later, the more popular version is the one where the character is in a porn movie.
Yeah. Like kind of like in the case with like the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate with Tarzan and Robert Howard with Conan, right?
Yeah. Now see, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Tarzan stuff is public domain now. Anyone can write a Tarzan story. Tarzan, the word, is trademarked. So you can't write a story called Tarzan and the Lost City of Emeralds. You can write a story called The Lost City of Emeralds, and you can even say on the back of it, Lord Tarzan of the jungle is going to go on this adventure, and call him Tarzan all throughout the book. You just can't market the book as that title.
Yeah, because I know this is something you and I talked about before when we were talking about the whole issue with young Ripa, Eric July, and the whole thing over the the ISOM character and the use of the name and stuff like that. So if you can explain that aspect to me one more time, the difference between the naming of the character, the naming of the book. Can you explain that for me and for anybody else who might need to hear?
I mean, it's just trademark. You can't cause confusion in the marketplace and make it seem like you own this character. It's a product. Tarzan is a product, and therefore he's a marketed product, and you can't cause confusion in the marketplace. Same with Mickey Mouse. I mean, Steamboat Willie, the Steamboat Willie cartoon became public domain. You can start distributing Steamboat Willie all you want. You can start using the artwork from it all you want. We put out a Steamboat Willie coloring book. Go to criticalblast.com, hit the bookstore tab. There it is. It's our second coloring book in hardcover, and it's all Steamboat Willie. You can do what Disney didn't do and put it in color. But, we could not say Mickey Mouse on the cover. We could say Steamboat Willie. Who's got a cat? Because I'm thinking I've got one outside now.
That's me. Sorry.
Okay, that's cool. I'm expecting to pick up a kitten in a month, and I'm like, it's here early. What happened?
Somebody probably dropped, like in some of those old.
And the cat's already named Schrodinger, so I'm sitting here thinking like, it's not here, and it's here. It's living up to its name.
They're hiding from the vacuum that's going on elsewhere.
Perfect.
So yes, they're hiding out with me. I'm popular when the vacuum's on.
Well, I'd say for me, I think the copyright should be my lifetime for sure. I'm not sure how much.
You really think, Rick, you should own the right to a character in a white jumpsuit with a red cape with a red maple leaf on his chest? Because I guarantee you don't own that. Absolutely.
I own my Canadian Shield. I do. I have it copyrighted. I have that first book copyrighted. Somebody else can go and create a character called Canadian Shield, but they cannot create one that looks like mine.
But your dude is a guy in a white suit, the Canadian flag with a red maple leaf, the Canadian flag with the red cape.
Well, actually, it's a white maple leaf because I've got a red shield on it, and then I've got a white maple leaf in there. I've got a cape with that has a red shield, a white shield with a thing. I've got the mask. I've got the shield emblems on the gloves. They're red. I've made him enough distinct that
to me he looks like a dude with a maple leaf on his chest, which is like a stereotype.
And guess what? He's supposed to be, because he's the Canadian Shield.
Yeah. Well, I guess I don't know if Captain America, his outfit is really. I mean, there was that Star Shield, the Shield guy from the 30s, who was basically Captain America, and we've
actually read
the
Shield.
The
Shield.
By Archie Comics.
Now that character actually predates Captain America.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they're both dressed in the American flag, but they're done it differently.
But Captain Canuck had the same outfit. He was in the Canadian flag too.
But his again.
So is Guardian / Vindicator in Marvel.
So is Captain Alpha.
And both of those guys done it differently than my Canadian Shield. They put them in a Canadian flag. There's another couple guys that have Canadian Shield out there. There's another company, I forget what it is, recently has a Canadian Shield one out there. He's a guy in some sort of armored suit.
Okay, so Rick, do you think if the Disney Corporation made up a movie called Canadian Shield and it had your guy dressed in white and it became $1 billion movie across the planet, do you think your comic book sales would skyrocket? Would you make more money off that or less?
Well, that's the same argument that says that, if I pirated this movie, that I would have bought a ticket.
No, because that's the
hold
same
on.
creation. I mean, a different creation. The one thing, RJ, that I do agree with you, and that is I actually think, yeah, that your copyright, and maybe this is a distinction that's not otherwise made. I think J.K. Rowling should own forever, or her estate even forever, for practicality at least, maybe just one lifetime, her actual creations. So her 10 books of Harry Potter and this and that and this and that, if someone is going to go, I don't think someone should be able to fire up a photocopier in the backyard or a printing press and put out bootleg versions of Harry Potter and the Goblets of Fire, et cetera, and sell them. On that, I do agree with you. Although I do think J.K. Rowling is a good example of once you've made $1 billion off it, who cares if you lose the rights to it? But that being aside, but what I do think is that, again, if a diverse voice wants to really make a black Hermione Granger and wants to make a gay Dumbledore, although laughably J.K. Rowling tried to do it, but say wants to go one step further and wants to make a trans Hermione, I think some idiot out there who wants to make a trans Hermione and wants to draw up a story where the trans character is really like the head character and the Harry Potter is really the evil guy, I think they should be able to make that creation. And I think our culture would be enriched by it, even in that narrow sense where I'm being facetious about the actual subject matter. So I think a trans person should be able to make a really trans Harry Potter novel if they wanted to. I just think J.K. Rowling should only be able to own what she created, not what I created or what someone else
Someone
created.
can take what you created and do a different version of it. To me, that's like saying that, hey, your kid looks really cool, but I'm going to kidnap him now because I'm going to dress him different.
Well, I see it as Walt Disney taking a movie called Steamboat Willie and calling it Steamboat Willie.
Let's put that in another manner here. Let's put that in a slightly different manner. Taking into where we're at with our times right now. That would be like saying taking somebody else's kid, right, and saying, well, I think if let's say you have a little boy, right, a son, right? Well, I think he should be a little girl. So kidnapping them and then forcing them to go through the sex change operation as a child, and then
whoa!
You made this, you created it, but it's been 10 years now, so.
I don't think that analogy holds. What I do think the analogy holds is that's like going to Shakespeare and saying you can't write Romeo and Juliet because Christopher Marlowe did a version of that in your lifetime. Therefore, the English language never has Romeo and Juliet, never has West Side Story, never has the thousands of high schoolers who have read Romeo and Juliet and had romantic thoughts for the first time, or read it and vomited in the washroom because they weren't ready for romantic thoughts yet. The English culture would not have William Shakespeare if the Walt Disney Corporation was alive in Shakespeare's time, because Christopher Marlowe wrote versions of most of those plays. And I think that's a cultural obscenity, just like I think it's a cultural obscenity that we can't get a good version of Star Wars before I die. I'm 50 years old, man. In 20 years, I'm going to be dead. It might be 2 years. It might be 6 months before I'm dead, but it's not going to be 30 years. And I deserve to have the touchstones of my youth recreated in a way that reflects my own artistic version, what I'm willing to pay for, what I'm willing to buy, what I'm willing to create.
Why do you deserve that?
Because someone doesn't deserve the right to take it away from me, because
it wasn't yours.
It's not theirs. If I write it, it's mine. If I pick up my keyboard and I type it into my computer, that's my script. That's not Disney's script. That's not even George Lucas's script. If I write it, it's mine. Just like when Shakespeare wrote Romeo.
Yeah, well, nothing's stopping you from writing it.
But
just
see,
nobody, people are
Romeo
stopping
and
you.
Juliet.
People are just stopping you.
Being realistic, because the economic motivation to make money off it is why most artistic creation unfortunately gets created, and Disney and copyright law has taken away that motivation. So all the American scriptwriters not writing a good Star Wars.
All right. I want to give Rick a chance to respond because I think he was trying to say something. Then RJ, then we'll come back to you, Elk. Okay. So Rick, you were trying to say something.
Well, I said the one thing, but I was going to say something else. Answer his question from earlier about if Disney took My Canadian Shield and made a movie, I probably would not make any more money. I might make a couple more sales if somebody happened to find out. Unless Disney actually said this is Rick Piper's Canadian Shield, and then they looked me up, I wouldn't make any more money because unless Disney pays me money to make it, take My Canadian Shield and make it, I wouldn't make any more money. They would make all the money, and I wouldn't make a dime.
More than
Because
likely,
nobody
Disney
would know about
my
my
copyright violation.
All right, RJ, go ahead.
More than likely, Disney would sue Rick for copyright violation, like Warner Brothers has done with this new Lord of the Rings movie they're doing, The Hunt for Gollum, because there was already a fan film out there, 15 years old, called The Hunt for Gollum, and Warner Brothers is like, "Oh yeah, you're violating our copyright." I'm like, "Screw you guys! This is a 15-year-old story. You're just flat out stealing it." That's why copyright should exist. Those people who made that fan film should be able to take Warner to court and take $1 billion on.
I think the lack of copyright would have allowed that guy who made the Gollum film to go put it out in theaters. And he could actually make a deal with a studio to distribute it in theaters, and he could make his money that way. J.R.R. Tolkien's dead. We're not doing him any favors. We're not doing the creator any favors. We're not contributing in any substantial way to that individual's well-being. Whereas if we did have Gollum films that could be distributed, I think we'd all be enriched by it.
Okay, but what about Tolkien's family? What about his descendants?
Why, like, are we in an aristocracy now? Are Americans suddenly going back to the monarchy where they think if you own land in 1688, you should still own it?
What does Tolkien's descendants having a chance to earn from what their ancestor wrote,
or keep the integrity of their
what does that have to do with aristocracy? Aristocracy is royalty. Okay.
Aristocracy is about owning all the land in a country, and because your grandfather owned it, the peasants don't own it. They farm and work on it and are controlled by the aristocrats. I don't think J.R.R. Tolkien Jr. should be able to control what I write. If I want to write a Gollum story or film a Gollum movie, I should have the right to do it. And to be honest,
let RJ answer.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting this train of thought there. But if J.R.R. Tolkien left his estate, his land, to his son, as well as left his intellectual property to his son, why is it okay for you to take his intellectual property and write with it, but it's not okay for the neighbors to come over and plant a garden on the land?
Well, there's a lot wrong with that. One is a part of the history of the English-speaking world has been the inheritance rights, and the idea that we don't let aristocrats own everything from 300 years ago because England and Canada were owned by a certain group of families 300 years ago. We don't let them still own it today. We've broadened our interpretation of who should have rights to what. And copyright is one of the ones that has gone in absolutely the opposite direction. Whereas estates have been broken up into farm holdings, and now people in towns no longer pay rents to a lord who own their townhouse land. People own their own land. People own their own rights to what they create. If I want to film a Gollum movie and it's good and people want to see it and people want to pay me $10 to see it, and I can get a movie theater to pay me, I don't know, half of the $10 per ticket to go see the movie, why shouldn't I be able to have a Gollum movie? I should. And 100 years ago, I would have had that right. 50 years ago, before 1976, I would have had that right. We're literally talking about a property right that's only existed for 50 years, and it's gone in the opposite direction of every other property right. We don't allow aristocrats to own all the land because 50 families in England used to own all the land and did so for hundreds of years. There are now millions of us, and we have gained more rights and property rights have become more restrictive. The only glaring exception is an American corporation has forced this down the throats of every English-speaking society to the point where people can't even think, well, oh, why can't I write this? Wait a minute, I've been told since I'm a kid I'm not allowed to write this. Well, go write it. Why am I not allowed to do a Batman story the way I want to do Batman? Well, because someone who bought the idea from someone who stole the idea from the original creator because he didn't have a lawyer. That's why this is, and then this property right didn't exist before 1976, but now it does, and it's been applied retroactively. I think the reason
property
people have
right.
any resistance to it is simply because they never conceived of something different.
Okay, first off, we are coming up on 2 hours here, so I think we're going to start to wind this down a bit.
I have to wind it down early. I have company.
Yeah, well, if you can just stick for a couple more seconds.
They're knocking at the door.
All right.
Gonna leave.
I just want to give Rick. I'm going to give you a chance to respond, and then we're going to start. We're going to start to wrap up. We've had a good conversation tonight. I like this. RJ, I know you probably won't be able to stick around to talk afterward, but I want to talk to you more about this later when I can talk to you myself. But overall, I think this is a good conversation.
It was a lively conversation, and I, Elk, I don't bear you any animosity in all of this. As snarky and as
I enjoy all the sarcasm, and I enjoy the conflict, to be honest. If everybody sat there and told me, oh yeah, I think you're exactly right, I'd be bored to death, and I would not have had as pleasant.
Well, that's actually what I'm looking for with these shows. That's exactly what this lively discussion, lively debate kind of thing, where we're just gonna, we're not gonna, as long as we're not.
Which is why I was more abrasive than I usually would be in a discussion, because I'm like, okay, let's make it entertaining.
Well, I think I understand. I'll talk to you about it. Later because I know you got to go. But as I said, I want to give you the last word on this specific discussion, and then we're gonna kind of wrap up. We're gonna do things a little reverse. We're gonna give everybody a chance to close out first. Then I'll do the
like the Goodnight Spoons comment. I don't think Tolkien kids did anything worth profiting over any more than I did anything worth persecution for the land our ancestors stole. So yeah, I completely agree. That's the way property rights have been going.
I have to open the door. I've got to go. But thank you for having me. I'll see you all later.
All right. Well, anyways, okay. So Rick, finish what you're saying. Then this discussion is over after Rick makes his final response. Then we're gonna go in. Then we're gonna, with RJ gone now, we're gonna go into this day in each history. Then we're gonna wrap everything up. So Rick, you had a final thought on what we're discussing.
Well, I was just gonna comment a little bit on what Elk was saying about the property rights. Well, technically they were already there. You were saying 10 years. They've just more been extended from 10 to 28 and then to 90 or whatever it is, plus the lifetime plus thing. That's all I was going to say. It's not that they weren't there. They've just been extended.
All right. So with that now, that's the end of this discussion. As I said, it was a good discussion. I think it was a very hearty discussion. I think, I think there was a lot we got through there. So with that, today is Sunday, May the 12th, 2024. So why don't we go ahead and take a look back at this weekend in Nietzsche history. Let me just review some things real quick here. 11, 04, and 04. Okay. So first off, we're going to head back. We're going to head back 70 years ago yesterday. 70 years ago yesterday, as on yesterday's date 70 years ago, the 25th issue of Woody Woodpecker went on sale from Dell Comics. Now, initially, this started out as part of the the 1942 Four Color series from Dell. They published 15 issues under the Four Color title, and then Walter Lantz, Woody Woodpecker continued starting with issue 16. So on this date, back in 1954, the 25th issue of Walter Lantz, Woody Woodpecker from Dell Comics went on sale. It sold for 10 cents, was 32 pages. So, all right. So, were you about to say something, Rick?
No.
All right.
Well, Good Night Spoon says, best show ever, 10 out of 10. Would hit the like button again.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Good Night Spoon. So now, anyways, getting ready to move on to the next piece of niche history from yesterday. So 15 years ago yesterday, WWE held its Monday Night Raw event from the Nationwide Arena in Columbus, Ohio. It was the go-home Raw before the Judgment Day pay-per-view. The main event saw Randy Orton defeat Batista via DQ. Earlier in the night opened up with Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase, who were who were Orton's two teammates in the Legacy stable, defeated Batista in a 2-on-1 handicap match. You also saw D. Byron Kendrick defeat Carlito, saw Santino Marella defeat Beth Phoenix, among the other matches. So that was the go home Raw before Judgment Day. So that happened 20 years ago yesterday in 2004. Or, no, actually 15 years ago in 2009. Sorry. Moving on now to 20 years ago yesterday. On this date, 20 years ago yesterday. On this
Didn't
date.
we just do 15 years ago, and now we're going to 20?
Well, because, 20 years ago today.
Oh, okay, because you said 20 years ago.
Remember, we're doing the weekend, Rick. We're doing the weekend.
Yeah. But you said yesterday.
Yeah, I know. You know. Sometimes when you're trying to do 2 days at once, Rick, you've seen it happen several times.
Okay, so it's supposed to be today, not yesterday. Okay.
Yeah.
You just messed up a little. That's fine. It's like I'm just
20 years ago today. Okay, 20 years ago today was the first day of the 2004 Cannes Film Festival, in which and among the highlights there, at least from the animation side of it, was Jonas Gaymert, a young Belgian film student, sends in an unfinished animated short, Flat Life, to the festival, which promptly wins the jury prize for Best Short Film. This launches his media career in Flanders. So that happened 20 years ago today. And 2004 is just so nice that we're going to hit it twice.
And no, Good Night Spoon. We try and read all the messages, but we got caught up in the lively discussion, so all of them did not get read on air.
Yeah. Usually we do try to keep up on them, but again, we as Rick just explained it. So on this date 20 years ago today, the Picture Magic and Rikuentai's OVA, Memories Off 3.5, was released on this date 20 years ago. So on this date 20 years ago today, Picture Magic and Rikuentai's OVA, Memories Off 3.5, was released on this date 20 years ago today. So now we've come down to the end, and before we head out, of course, I was hoping, again, I know RJ had to leave, otherwise I would have given him a chance to do an outro as well. So we'll start with Elk, do an outro, just promote anything you want, just explain to everybody who you are, and then we'll go to Rick, and then we'll wrap up.
I am not a creator, at least nothing that I'd like to disclose at this time. I am a lifelong lover of Shakespeare and of early Star Wars when George Lucas did it, and a loather of Star Wars since Disney has done it. And yes, I would like to thank you all very much for putting up with me chatting about a topic I feel strongly about. And thanks for listening. And I listen to you as well, believe me.
All right. Well, we appreciate that. It's always good to have hearty discussions after all. Rick, you want to do an outro?
Well, everybody pretty much here knows who I am. But, if you don't, go look up in the chat. My thing is there, my link to my channel. And if you want, subscribe and check out my content. And yes, I do know that. Good night, Spoon. And you are unhinged as well.
Yeah. Well, with that, I thank everybody for being here, and I thank the chat. Good night, Spoon. I thank you for joining us in the chat tonight. I thank our guests in the chat as well as our guests here. I do appreciate you guys coming on. We'll be back here tomorrow, and Rick, I'll probably have you on tomorrow night to go over some some of the news articles tomorrow night.
Yeah,
I'm caught up on all things anime, cartoons, comics, manga, pro wrestling, all that. So, and then of course this Friday, as I previously mentioned, RJ will be back here with me this Friday, when we'll be going over books that went on sale from Novelty Press from February 1940. Be reading from that, on those, and of course, I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow.
hey, and don't you recognize me? Good night, Spoon. I'm Bruce Wayne. I'm Batman.
Bye. Bye.